we have Ryan joining us to this channel from Los Angeles. So far away from here, and we have a huge time difference as well. So Ryan, welcome on board.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
Right, Ryan. Usually we do not go into personal details and describe the speakers. We straight away go into the question, and that's how this channel works.
Good.
So let me take just 2 minutes to ask you a question based on this foundation with which we are running this channel. Now, everyone is searching. And initially, of course, you want to make a good life, earn money and do a good job and do well in life and all that. Then after a while, there is something that most people felt they have missed out. You see, whatever you acquire by way of wealth or publicity or power or whatever, after a while you are still unhappy within. So something is definitely missing. So people start treading a path. Some go for meditation and others, they uh, join spiritual discussions. Then there are spiritual speakers. There's a whole lot of spiritual stuff going on. Now, Ryan, I must say, is a meditation speaker, and I have watched some of his videos, and I believe he has something important for our audience, and he will speak on this subject. The in search of happiness, in search of peace within. So, Ryan, let me ask you this first question: how a spiritual seeker should address this issue? Now, say, for example, if someone comes to you and say, well, I have gone through a lot of problems and I have fear, anxiety, stress. What is your initial approach to someone who comes to you with a very stressful story? We'll start from there.
It's a good question in the sense that it depends on where that student actually is. If the discussion or the interaction is not related to non-duality or awakening, and I get this as a general question, then often I listen to the person and just see if there's anything I could advise them on in regards to the conditions, or if I could point them to possibly learning to meditate or beginning to meditate in order to let go more. A lot of the suffering comes from the insistence that things be the way we like them to be or the way that we want them to be. And you're from Sri Lanka, so you know the Buddha. One of the Buddha's definitions for suffering is not getting what one wants, losing what one has. So I try to meet people on their ground, what their concerns are. But if it's in the context of a non-duality discussion, or if it's in the context of awakening, I'll attack the problem in of itself. The problem is never the objects. The problem is never the money that you're losing or the discontentment. That's the surface issue. The problem is actually the reactivity coming from our sense of self. It all comes down to self. So also in the context of awakening, the goal of happiness or the goal of inner peace, that goal itself is what is in the way of sensing the peace and the immediacy of reality in the now. It's the projection into the future and the fixation on the past, this life in thought that is the one of the primary causes of suffering. So I attempt to deconstruct that, or to get people to see that that's really the case, that whether things are good or bad, or whether they feel that they're winning or they feel that they're losing, or they're not good enough or they are good enough. All of these are stories.
I get your point. All right. I mean, first you ascertain where the person stands, that I understand. Now, let me put it this way, especially since you mentioned this non-dual message. Uh, Now, there is this, now I'm going towards little, into spirituality, particularly the versions that are arising from the modern non-dual teachers.
Right.
Now, their message is that we think we are born into this world and we are traveling along a timeline. And in that journey, we see a lot of, you know, happiness through achievement of goals. And then finally we die. So there is the world and there is me, and I come into this world, I travel along a timeline, and then now the non-dual message, for instance, it says no, it's not what's happening. And you need to look at this whole thing from a different perspective. And that's a non-dual message. Then there's this awakening message which you just mentioned, meaning you are awakened. So which now looking at the life from a different perspective, or this message for awakening, which do you choose in your as a foundation of what you are presenting?
Oh, as a foundation. Yeah, as a foundation, someone that is interested in practice, it would be to begin to see how the life that they know and the life that they live is constructed in thought and is upheld by feeling. So to begin to see dependent origination, or paticca samuppada, begin to see how their inclinations are conditioned by the past, begin to see how the present moment is constructed from these various constituents, the various areas of the field of experience. And we designate some of those areas as self and other parts of those areas as other or outside. There's the life within, and then there's everything on the external. And those designations are false. They're not true. So the foundation is to get the student to begin to discern what they know directly, or what can be known directly. Is there really such a thing as inner and outer? Is there really such a thing as self and other? Is there really such a thing even as awareness? Is there even such a thing as awareness? Is there actually such a thing as the body? So what is attempted to be done is to have the student deconstruct their experiential field and come to the ascertainment of truth, or of actual understanding. And it's that understanding that liberates. So the discussion with awakening, or this topic as it's presented in the modern scene, in many cases, it's still in regarding a process, right? That there's understanding or awakening that occurs progressively in time. But if you actually investigate the present moment, you find that's not the case. There is no time is based in memory. If there's no memory, there's no sense of time at all. So the sense that you're a spiritual person progressing, getting closer to enlightenment, is a fabrication of thought and feeling. So to see very clearly that what you perceive to be reality is fabrication, born of thought, feeling, and contact, and other aspects of dependent origination, gradually, quote, gradually. It seems that it takes time for the habitual tendency to cling and to grasp, for that to fall away. It can fall away immediately, but often it's something that happens in time.
the dependent origination, the Paticcasamuppada, which is said to be the heart of Buddhist teachings. And
Yes.
then it describes a process. It describes some kind of a causal connection, cause and effect kind of a thing. And now that you mentioned it, I would like to hear it from you because this may be the first occasion that we are hearing the dependent origination from a foreigner. So now that you mentioned it, I would rather get a bit elaborated version of that and how you apply it to this present, this now.
So there's a few different models of Paticca Samuppada, right? For example, Ajahn Brahmavamsa and many of the Theravada luminaries say that Paticca Samuppada can only be understood in the context of 3 lives. So when you look at the 12 links,
Yeah.
to get the whole view, it takes 3 lives. So that's a common way of looking at it. And I think scripturally, it's the one that has the most backing. But we can look also at dependent origination in moment to moment or on a daily basis, is in the sense that the driver of action, the driver of mental formations is karma. So in Paticca Samuppada, we have avijja or ignorance, avijja pachaya sankhara. So ignorance conditions formations. So that's the beginning. So ignorance conditions formations means that based on ignorance, based on having the view of a self, and therefore based on having the view and the perception of I, me, and mine, based on that misunderstanding, you engage in intentions. So sankharas are intentions, or it's also translated as choices, correct? There's also the bodily sankhara, the verbal sankhara, the mental sankhara. So these are the formations that lead to the generation of what becomes mind and body, or name and form in Paticca Samuppada. But looking at it just from the view of ignorance conditioning, or ignorance acting as a condition for the generation of karma, I'll give you an example of exactly how that works. So let's say I'm a businessman. So I'm under the impression that, one, I am actually a businessman. Like, that is the core of my identity and my personality. Because I have the view that I am a businessman, and I feel that based on that identity, I need to accumulate this or I need to do that. Some of these actions will be positive, some of these actions will be neutral, some of these actions will be negative. So in Abhidhamma, this is kusala, akusala, abhigata, right? Wholesome, unwholesome, and neutral actions. So the force of your previous intentions from your former existences and even from earlier in this life, they condition the mind, body, and the consciousness of the 6 senses and thinking in the present moment. So in the same way that if you've exercised a great portion of your life, you were an athlete in your youth, and you were one very diligently and dedicatedly, it's more likely that you will continue to exercise later in your life. Why? Because of the karmic formations, the intentions that were generated from those activities. So the ignorance is considered self-view fundamentally, and based on self-view, we have generated intentions over many, many, many lifetimes that keep the self intact. So avijja pachaya sankhara then acts as, yeah, exactly, acts as condition for consciousness. That's right. And then consciousness acts as condition for the arising of nama rupa. Nama rupa acts as condition for the arising of the sense bases. Sense bases act as condition for the arising of contact. Contact acts as condition for the arising of feeling. Feeling acts as condition for the arising of craving. Craving acts as condition for the arising of clinging. Clinging acts as condition for the arising of birth, aging, sickness, and death. So the whole life of the practitioner is this underlying nexus of karmic formations tainted, generated under the spell of avijja, under the spell of ignorance, and that relating to contact, feeling, and craving. So the reason that we crave certain things as opposed to not craving other things is because there are the karmic formations born of ignorance that make us inclined towards those specific cravings. There are certain things that you're inclined to versus things that I'm inclined to, and that those inclinations come from the past, and the past has been infected entirely by avijja. Even the present moment is affected entirely by avijja. The only time that avijja is completely expelled or extinguished is at arahantship.
Is required, but you just said it. But let me now ask you a direct question. It is this the ignorance of a self, that there's someone called me. Now, right now, this me or myself it's like a felt reality. It's felt. Now, for example, I could say, well, if I have a pain or if I have a headache, it is felt. And then we
Yes.
complete it by saying that it is felt by me. Right? And at the same time, when I'm talking to you, if you don't have this is a very pragmatic question, for the benefit of my viewers. Now, if I have a headache, it is a felt reality for me. And then when I'm talking to you, I would probably ask, fine, do you have it? No, I don't have a headache. All right. So that means I have it. You don't. So this me gets reinforced over and over and over. So it's like a day-to-day thing. It's getting cemented. Now there is no way out. If you really look at it, okay, how do I get out of this? I mean, a lot of people will come to you and say, "Hey, Ryan, can you pull this guy out of my system?" No. People would love to have it. Now, what's preventing all this?
Craving.
Hmm.
If there's no craving, the craving for the pain to go away, then you're left purely with physical pain. So it's the afflictive craving that is the cause of the suffering. You want the pain to go away. You want the pain to stop. You don't want the pain to come back. So fundamentally, it comes down to craving. That wanting for the conditions to be different, to cease, or to decrease. If there is no craving, then pain is just pain. And this is exactly what the Bahiya Sutta is saying, the discourse to Bahiya. The Buddha says, in seeing, there's only the seen. In hearing, there's only the heard. In thinking, there's only what is thought. In feeling, there's only what is felt. That translates to, in pain, there's just pain. In craving, there's just
It's in one of
craving.
right? It's in one of the sutras. Yeah,
Yeah. On to say, this being so, Bahiya, you're neither here or there, neither of this world nor the next world, nor between the two. This alone is the end of suffering. So it's just in relation to view. We have wrong view, that's why we suffer. We have the view of self, that's why we suffer. We have the view of I, mine, I, me, mine, so we suffer. But through insight or through right understanding, through view that is ascertained through practice, it becomes clear that what we consider to be self and what we consider to be I is actually not there. And that's when wrong view turns to right view, and misunderstanding becomes understanding, ignorance becomes wisdom. So on this point, the cause is really the craving, and it comes down to the second noble truth. Correct? The first noble truth is the truth of suffering. The second noble truth is the cause. The cause of suffering is
Suffering,
tanha, craving.
cause.
Yeah.
Tanha. Now, this gives a connotation that, all right, in order to detach from tanha, you need to give up things and always detach from. Now, there may be some truth in it, but this detachment, you give up your wealth, you give up your family, you give up your thing. Now, now there is problem what the Buddha did before,
Sure.
as a Siddhartha.
Yep.
But now, does that message go in that fashion? Now you give up everything and then you get rid of tanha because there's a problem with that.
It's that. So there were in the Pali canon, right? There were anagamis that were still householders. So clearly, a person can be very deeply realized and still be a householder. It doesn't mean that you become an anagami and then you tell your children that they're no longer your children.
Yeah.
And for an anagami, as you know, lust has fallen away. So that's a very deep craving. And anger has fallen away. That's also a very deep craving. So it's not that the objects of craving themselves are the problem. It's the craving itself. So of course, for the path of a renunciate and to become a monk and to become an arahant, purportedly, all of these things must be let go. But we have examples of people that were householders. It's really the craving itself that is let go or that is seen through. So yeah, it's definitely a good question in the sense that do I have to let everything go to become enlightened, or do I have to let everything go to come to a sense of peace and finally a sense of inner freedom? And what's very clear is that the problems are in the mind. They're not in the objects that are seen or not in the objects that are perceived. They're not in the people that you deal with. They're in your own reactivity. They're in our own craving. So it's craving that we look at, not at that which we're craving.
For instance, I will, I'll go to a food court, food parlor, and then I have various, varieties of choices. I can have a Thai meal, I can have a Malaysian meal, I can. So at that time, we would want to have maybe a Korean meal. And let's say, okay, you have a little bit of craving towards that, if you want to use that word. So you go and have it.
Yeah.
And as a lay person, okay, you have a nice meal which you wanted at that time. And that goes for relationships or whatever. I mean, whether it is sexual or otherwise. Now, where do you draw the line? For example, you have a nice meal which you have chosen. That means that you liked it. But when you say craving, and then you have the upadana, you sort of you go after it thereafter. That's the problem. All right.
Yeah, clinging. Well, there's also a difference between afflictive craving and non-afflictive craving. So, for example, you could consider the desire to meditate or the desire to enter jhana. That's classified as a desire, correct? Your mind is inclined towards that, and there's a wanting for that peace and an inclining towards seclusion, for example. But that's not an afflictive craving. So an afflictive craving is a craving for a thing which causes suffering. So of course there's a desire to cultivate the path, and there's a desire to improve one's meditation or to realize nibbana. That's not considered afflictive craving. Yeah, afflictive craving is craving for objects, which are of the nature of the senses, or objects which are impermanent, things which will inevitably lead to suffering when they depart or when we don't get them. So
as a lay person, if I take the same example of choice of a meal, where do you draw the line? In the sense you opted to have a meal, okay, that's a choice. So now say if someone who is undergoing some kind of a training, so okay, fine, you can have the meal that you want, but don't crave for it thereafter. Then you are not kind of addicted, or you are not going after it. So is that the place where you draw the line? I mean, someone who is making a will or an effort
yes,
towards that.
yes. Yeah, so I'm a
Mm.
layperson, right? I'm not a monk. So
Yeah.
I mean
Right.
you know this, but just to be clear for some readers or listeners. Generally, for example, if you're on a meditation retreat, you want to let go of delight, right? So when you're eating the food and you really just enjoy and delight,
Mm.
take very strong delight in what you're eating. The reason that is an issue, especially on retreat, is because it interrupts your mindfulness.
Mm.
So you're attempting to become mindful of the body or whatever your meditation object is in that course or in that retreat. And you'll find that the more that you delight in objects, the less you are aware, the less you are mindful. So the instruction is to not delight in what is seen, what is heard, or what is being tasted, so that the inner sukha, or the inner happiness and bliss that is born purely of the mind that is purified, will begin to emerge. So the issue with so many people in the lay life, the reason there's discontent so rapidly, especially in the modern era, is that our happiness is so dependent on external objects, whereas in Buddhism and in the teachings, the idea is that happiness comes from the purified mind. It comes from the mind that's released of clinging. So on a meditation retreat, really attempting to cling less or letting go of clinging and delight, you see immediately it has a purifying effect on the mind. It's just that it's difficult when you translate this to ordinary lay life. It's like, okay, so don't delight in anything, don't delight in any meal whatsoever. And of course, if you're really inclined on nibbana and becoming an arhat, the advice would probably be yes. But I think we can do this, we can approach Dharma in a way where we apply it as much as possible without being obsessive about it or compulsive about it in a way that would actually interrupt or decrease the power of our mindfulness. I would say it's better to just have a meal and have the meal and
Mm.
enjoy it and be
Mm.
as mindful as you possibly can than
Mm.
actually be in worry and anxiety over how much you're delighting or how less you're delighting.
Mm.
The idea is to just let go.
Because if you are trying to be conscious, you are trying to be mindful, even if a thought comes, let's say a hatred, a thought of a hatred, okay, you are aware of. So that means you are in full control. Then if you have a lustful thought, yes, you are aware of it. Sometimes if it is a hateful thought of someone that you don't want to see, in your lifetime, well, the thought will come and go, that's fine. But if it leads to some kind of an action, you might speak to another person about something that has happened in the past and something that person has done to you in the past. I'm trying to be extremely practical in that's why I'm raising this question, because
Yep.
otherwise people will take this as a knowledge. Oh
Right.
yeah, it's sanha, it's all that. But day to day,
How do you apply
at
this?
grassroots, yeah, grassroots levels, how can you? I'm trying to show you the real life situation how it happens. So,
Yep.
so if you are conscious of your thoughts, that might help. But usually, what happens is it's a thought, then it arouses some kind of a sensation, feeling, which might lead to an action. So, as you said, if someone can go through some training to be mindful of what's going on in your mind, the thoughts, all that, it will be a good start, isn't it?
Yeah, that's where we all start, but it's not a long-term solution.
Hmm.
The solution to reactivity is to penetrate anatta or corelessness, right?
That's
Is to
right.
get to the root of it, which is the self that is getting angry, or the self that is experiencing anxiety. If your sense of self can become thin enough, transparent
Mhm.
enough, then the reactivity can go down. And that's only possible, that's primarily possible through insight or vipassana, right seeing. Because otherwise you're just your reactivity is going to depend on if your mindfulness can catch
Yeah,
it before you have a
yeah,
reaction.
exactly.
Yeah. So if you're lucky, yes, your mindfulness was good and you were able to, not shout when you felt the impulse to shout. But the long-term solution is to become so transparent and so free in the mind that you don't react you don't react the way that you used to. And that does happen. That is possible.
This now even Lord Buddha in the how the story goes, this Anatta Lakkana Sutra is the second sermon. In
Yes.
other words, Buddha himself went and took the bull by the horn and said, look at all these, images, feelings, all that, and see where you find the person, something. But like logically now, even some of these science experiments, they have done experiments on free will and choice, all that, and double slit experiments. So there's some indication to, to show that there is no one controlling this. It's cause and effect.
Mm.
Now, logically, you can establish that yes, there's no person, but when it comes to experience, that person is very much there. That's a question I asked you at the very beginning. It's a felt reality. Now there are many instances where some people have got this message like this, and they're done. And there are others who will go through some kind of a process, and it will take a long time. And then there are other speakers who are advocating a direct path. They will
Right.
show you so many examples and they call it direct path. And some comparing this life and existence to a dream and say it's like a dream. So there is no doer inside a dream. If I ask you to give some example, maybe one or two, through which people can start looking at this self, the the ignorance of having this thought as a self, some kind of a so that people could look at it from that point of view.
The issue is that people say they look at it, and people say that they know their
Mm,
mind, but they actually don't. So they know their reactions, and they know that they're
mm,
having a reaction, and
mm,
they know that they think the same things every single day. But you have to look at how many seconds of
mm.
seeing is there, right? How many moments of sambhajanya, of clear comprehension and sati and mindfulness, how many seconds of that is actually there in regards to their mental processes, in regards to the sense of self itself. So when you tell people to look at themselves, even that is a confusing thing. They say, what do you mean look at myself, or look at my mind?
Yeah.
So first to actually place attention on awareness itself, and to place attention on different areas of our field of experience, that is what gradually produces the insight of no self. Or it could be an immediate insight, like you mentioned, right? But the
Mm,
point is that people know, they listen to the science, or they listen to a monk say, you know, anatta, dukkha, anicca, all of this,
Yeah.
and they say, yeah, of course it makes sense. But
Yeah.
making sense is different from how many times has it been seen? How many times have you looked at the stream of thought? How many times has awareness been taken as an object?
Yeah.
For
Yeah.
how long? Have you had if people do that for 7 days, if they look at actually any part of the experiential field for 7 days, especially looking at awareness for 7 days uninterruptedly, very possible for a significant shift to occur by the end of those 7 days, because we're under the impression of I, me, mine. But when we actually look at this awareness, we find that there's not actually anything there, and that corelessness is liberating. But the point is, we never look, or we never see it enough for the liberation to mature. That's the difference. For some people, that maturation of insight takes time. For other people, that maturation of insight is immediate. They just read one line of the Buddha's teachings and boom, it's done, right? But for other people, they need to look and investigate the 5 aggregates again and again and again and again, and then the 3 characteristics, anicca, dukkha, anatta, become apparent. And with those 3 characteristics, there's seeing them very clearly, there's an even deeper letting go, and then a person experiences cessation of perception and feeling.
Now, in our part of the world, we don't have, yes, we do have retreats, but these retreats are having these meditation sessions. Now, I mean, the samatha and vipassana and so on.
Right.
Now, people, not so many, because people are busy with their day-to-day lives, but some, having realized that we need to find this out, we also have some retreats, what we call meditation retreats, and where they practice this meditation, and they come back and say they feel good. And, I mean, they manage to bring the mind, down to some serenity, and calm the mind, all that. But as you said, there's something missing. That means, are you honest to yourself? Have you been seeing this clearly? Have you been watching this how many seconds, as you rightly said? Now, you have to have some kind of honesty within you, because finally, this is your journey. I mean, you can be a good speaker on this whole thing, but finally, how much honesty that you have carried in this effort. So, like now, although people are saying that, I can see my mind, I can tell you these thoughts can come and take you, like an eagle, and then you are gone. Sometimes you're gone for a couple of hours, and then
Right.
by the time you realize, so this is the reality.
Yeah.
And sometimes, Ryan, the more you look at the thoughts, the more thoughts get generated. That also can happen. And all right, let's okay, forget about the actions, forget about the karmic forces. How do you observe the thoughts? Is there a way of observing? I mean, of course, one can say do nothing and observe, but is there a way of observing and kind of selecting which thought is harmful, which thought is not, which thought is in the middle?
Yes, that can be done, and there's reason to do that, in the sense that you can begin to have less of an inclination towards unwholesome thoughts, right? But this is all the extraneous stuff. So where the freedom is at, if you were to take like a direct path into deep meditation, or into, really into this, it would be to sit without craving. Just abandon craving, just let go and do nothing. So if do nothing is too subtle, then you're given a meditation object like observing the breath. But even with observing the breath, the point is to do as least as possible and allow the insights to emerge naturally out of the wisdom and out of the stillness of the mind, not as something that is being orchestrated or concocted by doing or by the doer. It's really, what happens is that by disengaging mental activity, like this whole thing of trying to figure out where to put what and classification, if you're able to disengage your center of volition on a meditation retreat for long enough, that means sit without craving, sit having let go, sit just being aware, and not even holding on to being aware, but just to sit and to be in this desireless release state, that shuts off your left brain, and this right side of the brain becomes activated, and it's very possible for non-duality or for many things to open up when this thinking, obsessive, doing, controlling aspect of the mind has been shut off or it has been surrendered. The issue is that people rarely get to sit long enough for that disengagement to go deep. That's the issue. You can meditate for 15 minutes or 30 minutes every day, very good, better than nothing. But the reason that progress is very slow is because those 30 minutes a day add up over many years, and then bang, after 5-10 years, some awakening or some major shift happens. But that can happen more readily if you stay disengaged from thought for longer periods of time. It's just very difficult, of course, if you run a business or if you have children. But it's certainly possible. In Zen, they say, don't give rise to a single thought. So that's how they approach the meditation. It doesn't mean that mental pictures stop necessarily. It's just that there's no longer any voluntary participation in the thinking process, or in the discriminating process, or in the analyzing process. So that's one approach, right? To just disengage completely. The mind becomes very released from craving. It enters cessation of perception and feeling at some point. It has its first taste of nibbana. The other approaches is to apply attention at each of the 5 aggregates and to discern the 3 characteristics that way. Why? Because in seeing the 3 characteristics in the 5 aggregates, clinging, the release of clinging happens automatically. So when you see that the awareness is not actually constant, that if it lapses, if you see that enough times, you stop clinging towards awareness. You stop identifying it as self. It's just that the depth of the seeing, the duration of the seeing, the constancy of the seeing is eventually what turns into knowing.
I tend to agree with you when you said there is no point in beating around the bush, discussing all philosophical thing. If you can't just drop this craving, because that is the one that is causing all these, you might as well just go for it and say, okay, that's it. It's like, you are trying to keep something. Okay, I'll drop that last. I'll do everything else, but I'll drop the craving. I like the way you said it, because finally, we can go on with the discussion for hours. Like finally, if you are not understanding that, but thank you very much for saying it. But at this, probably it's it can be logically understood. Even a guy who is in the stock market making a lot of money, all that's, but logically, you will never be having peace. It's every time you live in fear, because it's caused by the craving. So when you use the word craving, that's why I said, when you mention this word craving, people get the impression you have to drop everything, give up everything. But you said no, there are lay people who have been able to understand and grasp it, and then you just carry on because you have responsibilities and so on. Now, when someone comes to you, I believe you conduct retreats, I believe you are sort of having one-on-one, some kind of you are a coach, life coach. In relation to this particular word, craving, I like it because okay, that is the one. Let's take on the main cause. Is there a gradual way of dropping things, or is there a way to sort of completely change your approach to it? When you see the craving. So are you saying that it's better you do it fast, or is there a gradual? Of course, that depends on individual. But how would you sort of, just elaborate a little bit, and then our audience will understand it a little better?
Practicing letting go. Every day you have many opportunities to let go. Every day you have many opportunities to surrender your reaction. Even in one meditation session, if you and I, we probably have a similar background in our training. We're both from Theravada, so the monks always taught us, like, keep your mind on the meditation object. Don't let it go anywhere, right? So when we try that, one of the first instances of the chance to surrender reactivity is when our mind wanders, and then there's irritation that it wandered.
Mm-hmm.
You're irritated at yourself that you weren't able to keep your mind on the meditation object. So in that instance, immediately you surrender that reactivity. So how do you do that? That's a very big question. How do you actually let go? There's two ways. One is to just see the process happening with mindfulness and not do anything. And then the other is to actually release the tension in the physiology. So you'll notice that anytime your mind wanders and let's say you're mindful and you're relaxed, right? You're just noticing the breath. When your mind wanders off of the breath into whatever mental phenomena has occurred, or even if a sound takes your attention, when you become aware again, you'll notice that there's a tension in the body. There's a slight physiological tension that occurs with the wandering. So the idea is, from this tension, then the next chain independent origination arises. So there's now this tension, and then the craving for your mind to be still will arise next. So right when that happens, you relax the physiology. You just relax that tension that has arisen in the body. So you let the distraction be there. You let the fact that your mind wandered be the case. That is the reality of the situation. That is what is happening. The mind has wandered. Not a big deal. And then from this place of having let go, having released that craving right there on the spot, release that craving. Then you notice the breath. You notice the breath again. So in meditation, in one single session, you'll have many opportunities to actually release craving by surrendering your reactivity. And it can be done in this method of relaxing the physiology, or it can just be done by not doing anything and just continuing to be.
Right. I do not want to sort of raise any more questions, because you basically said it all. You take it or leave it. This is what causes suffering, and this is what you need to do. So basically, you gave the message. I think I'm in a way happy, because rather than going round and round and talking about things like oneness and you see all that. Finally, if you really ask, it's deep down, it's what it is, right? Sometimes people don't even accept that this is the craving that is causing all that. So
Yes.
I'm so happy that we took it up. So Brian, maybe we can continue with this type of discussions whenever you have little time.
Oh, we can
And
do a part
this
2
is
or a part 3. I'm happy to.
that's
You're a
right.
great.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
Because the reason is now today is the initial thing. Actually, I didn't even know what kind of questions I should ask you. Although I had watched a few things, but since you gave a good solid foundation, now I can come back to you with some questions coming from the audience, and then I line it up, and then we'll make it part 2 and 3. So I'm very grateful that you allocated this time, and I'm sure Sri Lankans will also be very grateful to you. And we'll stay in touch. And thank you very much, Ryan, indeed.
Thank you for having me, and talk to you soon. Sadhu.
Sadhu.